Welcome to Carnivore Radio's first podcast. Your host, Jeffrey Sherman and Dr. Eric Lopkin. This week's subject is the shootings in Florida, gun violence, and gun control in general. To start, I'll throw it out to Dr. Lopkin. Dr. Lopkin, your takeaways on the last couple weeks' events.
Well, the events, of course, are horrific. And, we need to do something about it. My big concern about the jump into gun control is, while I have no problem with most of the proposals that have been put forth, I don't think any of them on their own are actually going to solve the problem. And I'm concerned that jumping into doing something about gun control, people are going to ignore the rest of the problem, and then we're back where we started.
I think there's an excellent point, Dr. Lopkin. I think the real issue, and I do have a problem with this. I believe that, they should close. I'm all for closing the loopholes on people with serious mental illnesses, people that have been in institutions or have history of violence. Those types of things should obviously be restricted from getting access to any kind of gun. And then some of the loopholes and some of those gun shows should be closed as well.
Right.
The problem that I see, here's the big problem, is the liberal overreach, because I'm not so sure they're so concerned. Everyone's concerned. Yes, they're concerned about the violence, but their bigger agenda, and they always have a bigger agenda, is to take away our guns. And they always say you don't need an assault weapon. You don't need these, high ammunition guns for hunting. But they confuse the issue because it's not about hunting. The Second Amendment is all about protecting the civilization or the populace from an overreaching government, which is what liberalism likes to do and is hell-bent on doing. And I think that's the biggest issue. What do you think, Dr. Lopkin?
That's actually a very big issue. In fact, I find it very ironic that the same people that are yelling that we have to get rid of the guns, when you bring up the Second Amendment, they tell you, well, that's about a militia, about defending against a government gone crazy, and we don't have that. And yet, not 1 year ago, they were complaining that that's exactly what Donald Trump was doing. He was taking over the government, he was shutting down media, and they were accusing him of creating exactly the situation that we are supposed to have guns to prevent against.
Excellent point, Dr. Lopkin. They're still doing it today, that he's a strong man, that he's, overreaching. But you look at also some of the abuses that obviously are not underreported, that are underreported with President Obama. Some of the things he did, the surveillance state, that's the creeping momentum of a overreaching government. Don't you think so?
Oh, absolutely.
The seeds being sowed.
Under the Obama administration, you had the IRS going after organizations that did not agree with Obama's agenda. You had the FBI illegally getting records from the Associated Press, talk about shutting down free press. You had Fast and Furious, but none of that mattered.
No, none of that mattered. So I think the real issue is, I think we're in agreement, is there needs to be better enforcement, possibly in more legislation on let's not have these nutcases have guns. Now, the other issue, so we agree on that, I believe. But I think we also agree. Well, go ahead.
I'm concerned about how we're going to prevent the mentally ill from getting guns. Because if their doctors are required to reveal their medical records to the government, that's going to stop people with real mental issues from getting help.
Oh, absolutely. And then where does it stop? Okay, so now that's like a pipeline, because I don't trust the government with information, keeping information. So what happens now? No, employers can get your credit score. Now next they can get your mental health history. It's a slippery slope.
Yes, it's a very slippery slope.
Yes. So I think for our first podcast for the Carnivore Radio initiative, I think we've covered some really good topics. I think we've covered the situation quite well. Any closing comments, Dr. Lopkin?
I think we've got some major problems to deal with in terms of keeping our kids safe. Gun control is a small part of the conversation. It's not the whole conversation.
And we do agree that, again, because there's always an agenda, that the far left, or right now, the Democratic Party in general, obviously never has any good tragedy go to waste because they're using this as another opportunity to seize guns.
No politician on the right or the left has ever let a tragedy go to waste. This is the best way for them to get whatever their agenda is across. And that happens on both sides of the spectrum. You've been listening to Carnivore Radio's podcast. You can catch us here every week. Carnivore Radio is part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can listen to the podcast at blogtalkradio.com/Xvadio. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can listen to us live every Friday at 4 o'clock on WESU 88.1 Middletown, Connecticut. You can also catch us online at WESUFM.org. We look forward to hearing from you, and see you next week.